Hey guys, and welcome to today's episode of Give It the Beans. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, you might be thinking that I've got Chris Hemmenworth on today's podcast, but unfortunately I don't. It's a poor version, poor man's version, Dundee's very own version. Ali Burge, how are we doing, mate?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, not too shabby. Just a bit shite that the gym's opened, and you had to deload, and then I had to deload the week after. But anyway, the listeners are probably wondering, they haven't heard from you for a wee while. So do you want to kind of just give people a summary on how was lockdown for you, business, what did you do, your physique, your clients, everything else in between, mate?
So, lockdown, obviously, from the get-go, it wasn't great because we've never experienced anything like that. But I'll go into my clients first because that's obviously the main thing. Across the board, it was pretty productive. Like a lot of clients still did shoots, a lot of dieting phases. The area it was difficult was anyone that was in like the height of an off season because you can't replicate load no matter how hard you try with a band and a dumbbell. So that became a little bit, not annoying, but it just meant that a lot of people's goals had to be shifted. So interesting, but thank God it's over and I hope we never go back into lockdown again. For me personally, I was at the height of a gaining phase when lockdown happened, and then I started to recomp. I then got relatively lean, so obviously I did a photo shoot a month ago. I'll put the photos up soon, but yeah, I got like relatively lean. I'd say I was still probably a couple of kilos away from stage lean, but considering that was all done training in a garden with very limited equipment, it's pretty nuts to see. And I'd done that also training with a lat injury the whole time. So it's pretty productive. What I would say about lockdown, and I've said this like on a few different stories and stuff, but it does go to show you that yes, training in the gym's cool and we can do all these technical stuff, but at the end of the day, it's your adherence to the basics that get you in shape. And I think, yes, I don't want lockdown to happen again, but it does show you that just adhering to the plan works. So it's been a cool scenario. Obviously, we work together. Business has been fluctuating, but we have been productive. I think from a brand perspective, we could not be in a better position, really.
Yeah,
So
and I think you're absolutely right. If for those of you that don't follow Ali, I'm sure that you all do, and that's probably the best Ali's ever looked. And that was I prepped him a couple of years in a row. The first year, probably overspilled or spilled you over for your photo shoot, and then we probably did the same for a couple of shows, and then before we nailed it. But you look better this year than you did in any show. So again, the fact you'd done that from like a tent in in someone's back garden was pretty crazy. But I think for the listeners that don't know, Ali's probably a humble guy. When you started lockdown, you pretty much doubled your online client base from the start of lockdown to now, right?
yeah, so when I started lockdown, I was half one-to-one coach and half online, with the aim to be fully online by the end of the year. But now I am basically an online coach. I do a couple of sessions with clients I've worked with for years that I just get on well with, so I still do that. But yeah, my client base has doubled, and that's again, I said it's doing the basics, but it's not through me just magically doing that. It's from a lot of productivity, speaking to a lot of people, producing content that hopefully people take value in. So I think Vaughn's the same as me, and like we are very driven people, but when shit happens, you've just got to deal with it and try and just focus on still moving in the right direction. So it's been good, all round.
Yeah, I think that it probably leveled up everybody's programming, trying to actually recreate some sort of, banded foam roller hack squat. And the thing is, like, there'll be some people listening, like in England and across the world, that are like, "What are you guys on about?" But it's the Scottish listeners, and the fact this is a Scottish podcast, that the gyms have only been open pretty much now a week and a half. But I think it leveled up everything that we done, because we changed some of the systems that we do, our check-ins and whatnot, and started doing all the bloody home exercise tutorials, which, to be fair, they're there now in case, fingers crossed, it doesn't, something like this happens again. But
I, I,
anyway,
I don't know if you've seen as well, I've had a few clients that have went back to the gyms and they might have been guilty of pushing their logbook a little bit too high, and now they're like, oh, I'm connecting with movements a lot better. So there's some positives.
100%. And I think that now is better time than any to kind of delve deep and get into today's episode on the topic of pretty much first-time competitor mistakes, and then how to, or what not to do and what to do going into 2021. We will only have had a couple people step on stage by the end of this year. However, we have yourself, me, and Clara. The team have a lot of people looking to compete in 2021. But I feel that there's probably some things that we've done ourselves as competitors wrong, and probably at the same time done wrong with previous clients or clients that are still on board, and we've learned from their mistakes. So if you were to give your 2 cents on let's just things you'll see first-time competitors do, if there was a list, and by all means list them off, but then we'll kind of go back and forth on them. What do you think they would be? And let's maybe start off with females first, and then we'll go into guys.
Okay, so females. One thing I definitely see from the get-go with people dieting, especially for the first time, is they go every single tool in the toolbox in right at the start. So they might go from calories being, let's just say, 1,500 on average, and they drop right down to 1,100. They're doing 200 minutes of cardio a week, and their steps are really high. Now, obviously, that's going to bring them your body weight, but it's just not productive. And I do see that happen a lot, where people start really aggressively and you've just got nowhere to push.
Yeah, you're right. But I think for me, like, mostly, if I was to think back to when I was first, I wouldn't call myself at the time a prep coach, it was probably I would prep people that didn't have enough tissue, and would just say, right, go ahead. By the time they got to the end, and my main example is thinking of when you first prepped Chloe for the Scottish PCA, where she done well. I prepped Tony, and when I look back at Tony, she was just like over dieted. She lost muscle mass. She looked stringy, and that was simply because at the time she just didn't have enough tissue. So if there is someone out there who is maybe wrapped into this whole okay, I'm following so-and-so Instagram, they compete, I've got to compete. Where should they start first? What should they assess, in your opinion?
So I think like exactly what you've just hit the nail on the head with there is, so people probably look on our Instagram and think we look relatively big. Believe me, we are not. Like, we're in okay shape, but I still don't have enough muscle to compete at the level I would want to. So I think what happens at the start is, and it can be an awkward conversation for people because they don't want to hear you don't have enough tissue. But at the start, if you don't have enough muscle, dieting, you'll get lean, but you're not going to look the way that in your head you visualize because you're looking at people on Instagram. So I would say there's always got to be should I go into a gaining phase, or do I have enough tissue to compete next year? That would be the first thing I would say. The other thing would be, have you actually ever attempted some form of dieting phase? So if you've not, I would probably suggest that you should try that. It's not as simple as just literally, oh, well, I've got a plan, so I'm going to be able to stick to it. So those would be 2 big ones for me. Also making sure that you actually understand the process and you understand how long it takes, what the actual, like how prep looks, and you're not going in blind, because people can be a bit blindsided by it. Like, oh my God, I've got to do that much cardio. I've not got enough time.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think it takes a good coach to tell someone you've not got enough tissue to compete yet. Whereas years ago, I probably wouldn't even say that to someone. I'd be like, oh no, I can't say that. I can't offend them. But it's as you said, how often will someone come to you and say, oh, I've been told by so-and-so I could compete and I could do well, and you instantly go, well, I mean, I think that personally you would do even better with X amount of time off. And I guess it's how you word it. Unfortunately, you are quite an abrupt guy, and anyone that follows you will know that I'll be a little bit more sensitive about the subject, whereas you might just be a little more to the point. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think I'm honest purely because if I'm getting coached, I like someone to be honest. Like, I pay Cal. I don't want Cal to be nice to me. I just want him to tell me what's going on. And like from a perspective of that, so I've got two clients. So my client Magda, who you will have seen on my Instagram, who looks great, and she would have done very well on stage. When she came to me last year, the coach she was working with had her on minimal calories. She was training reps in reserve, 30 rep crap, and we spent a year almost building her calories up. She was on like 3,300 calories, right, for a small female. But if we didn't do that, she looked amazing for a shoot. But if we didn't do that, she wouldn't have looked amazing for a shoot. And you have to get, as a first-time competitor, you have to be okay with the fact that you might want to compete in 6 months, but you have to be okay with the fact that it might take you 2 years to get where you want to.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that people often get enamored by Instagram without really seeing, like, there might be some people that they'll see Magda's photos and then just go, right, I want to compete, without actually seeing the fact that you guys spent a year doing that. And that's just one example of the other, of the bikini girls that you work with or I work with. But if we were to take the scenario where someone is lean enough, someone does have enough tissue, and that's not the mistake, what could you think of in your brain? And I'll add my 2 cents on what mistakes do you see those, because that's a whole different kettle of fish. What do you see those competitors' mistakes make?
So I personally think, this is just anecdotal, but what I do see with people who have decent muscle mass, one would be they think they can get stage lean faster than they can. I see that a lot. Or like when I'm speaking to people in a consultation, they might say, right, 12 weeks. And I'm like, let's talk 16 to 20. So give yourself enough time. The reason being is you're not going to get to that point where you've got to panic. That would be a big one. What I think also happens a lot, and this is with male and females, for some reason, as they get leaner and they get lighter, everything, training starts to adapt and change in some weird way. People change their programming, and this still happens, and I don't understand why. What you've done to get you in shape keeps you in shape. Don't be going into some crazy supersets. Every rep movement's 20 to 25 reps because you're trying to burn more calories, things like that. I think as well with people with muscle, this is for everyone, but bodybuilding is a performance sport, not a dieting sport. We are trying to, and I stole that, by the way, from Cuba, but you're trying to, your sessions have to be a priority, not just how much output you can do. And that for me is a big one, because I've done it before and over dieted or end up in not looking that great.
Yeah, I think that to kind of go back on one of the earlier points you said, it kind of goes inside of, if you've never done anything like it before, and then you start a prep, having never done even a small recomp or whatnot, you just don't realise how shit that you do feel. And a lot of perhaps the first timers who have enough tissue, they'll get to perhaps that 8-week out marker where at that point, things are pretty ramped up. Like you need to be in a good position 8 weeks out, right? And their training intensity might slip. And how I put it in an article, or I am putting an article this week, is that their session slips, so they stop working as hard because they feel shit. Calorie expenditure drops down, but also they're not providing the muscle with enough stimulus for it to hang around. So my point to add to that would be start risking losing a bit more muscle mass than they naturally would, because we know that'll happen, but it's something that you and me fucking love training, jacked up our eyeballs and want to be massive, and we'll love that. But perhaps often that side of things, especially maybe the bikini girl side of things, they don't realise how hard they'll need to continue to train whilst on very, very little food. Because, I mean, what would be a good scenario would be, remember when you were prepping with Joe?
Yeah.
You told me you had a bowl of oats, and after it you were greeting because you were so hungry, and your next meal wasn't for hours. Is that about right? Yeah.
So the first time I prepped, everyone can find a photo of me looking like this, but I personally think I should not have competed. But Joe's a very good coach, and my goal was to compete, so I wasn't listening to him in that scenario. But I didn't have enough muscle. I was on very low calories. It was the first time I'd ever dieted, and you hit this weird feeling where just walking around, you feel like everything, you're dragging your feet, it's hard. picking up a pen's hard. And I remember he gave me a little bit more food, and I was eating a bowl of porridge or oats, and I actually started crying. But it's because your emotions, when you get very lean, you just turn into a different beast. And I didn't know how. Now, when I do it, the blinkers are on. But then I didn't know how to control it. And people don't really understand what it's like to get that lean. If you've not done it before, it's very difficult, especially if you aren't as, well, not lucky, but we work in an industry where people understand it. If you're someone who works a desk job, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah. I think what you kind of said or alluding to there is a lack of support network that, you know, Sheila from the office that loves smashing the cookies is never going to understand why you're having chicken salad, chicken and broccoli, whatever it is. But I often think that for the girls and guys that we prep, having the community is huge for them. And I kind of wish that some of the earlier ones had that and would have perhaps, not that they weren't successful, but would have perhaps even been more successful just having that support network around them. But the difference was at the time, the majority of the people I prepped were in the gym. And I was in the gym, so it was different. Whereas now, the online community of the, you know, in the female chat, the guy chat, you've got girls down in London, girls up in Aberdeen, all able to support each other. And it's awesome to see, but you're 100% right. I think that not letting other people's opinions influence your decision making, because the example I'll give was last year. I had a client check in. His name was Andy. This wasn't a feeling. He said, "Oh, I went over my cars at the weekend, was at a barbecue. Why'd you do that?" He went, "Oh, because everybody was telling me, you know, I look good and I'm way ahead of it, and I've kind of lost my head." You see that a bit?
Yeah, definitely. I think I said this to someone the other day. So I had a consult call, and it's someone who's competing next year, and they were speaking about balance. And I said, balance can be done, but it's very unproductive. In a certain scenario, by the way, before anyone starts giving me loads of shit. But I mean, in a prep scenario, balance is going to put you in a worse position, and you're not going to look as good as you could. So all those little things in other people, you've got to remember, your mates like you regardless. They just don't give a shit about how you look. Yeah. Same with my mum, for example, does not give a shit about bodybuilding. So is she going to, she doesn't understand it. So you have to have a network around you. Like I'd say, have a good training partner. Like me and Vaughn trained together, or me and Fitch throughout my prep, or my client Scott is a very good training partner. But have someone there that on the days where you are vacant and you're grinding, they're loading your machine, they're telling you what you're hitting. Yeah. That's a good thing to have. But also, you need to have a network where you're speaking to people who are also in the same scenario. Because and also I would say, if you've got a partner, it's not fair for them if you just keep moaning about how tired you are and stuff like that, because they're not prepping. They're not a bodybuilder. They're not a competitor. But if you're speaking to someone who is also a competitor, they understand and you can speak about that. Whereas if you're just annoying everyone else, they do not care, and that's not going to be helpful for you.
Yeah, and I think that I've learned that the hard way over the years. Back in my first prep, pretty much cutting off everyone that wasn't interested in my prep. I wasn't interested in them, and probably it took its toll on a lot of, say, friendships, relationships, or whatnot at the time. But I think that over the years, once you've done it once, it's easy to then try and still be the same guy with, let's say, your partner, or get it with your partner. But I think the first time it's incredibly difficult because inevitably it consumes you, even consumes you when you're at our sort of level, right? But we just not deal with it.
That's why I think that one of the facts that we've got our group chats and everything like that, like people probably for the most part, like a lot of it's just chat about random things. But one of my clients is prepping for a photo shoot at the moment, and he messaged me the other day and he was asking about his sex drive, and he was like, "Mate, mine just went from here to here," and I was like, "Dude, it happens," but because he spoke to me about that, what's he then went and done? He spoke to his partner. Look, it's nothing to do with you. It's prep, blah, blah, blah. Now, she's all cool with it. But if you don't understand all those things, it's not just that. Sleep. If you're someone who works early mornings, but your sleep's shocking, you need to, if you've got someone to speak to about all this stuff, it takes that burden off of you. It takes that weight off your shoulders. Otherwise, you're prepping by yourself. Every little thing that you're not used to is going to weigh you down. And you don't want that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Not something I'd even actually thought to mention, but what I'll always do in that scenario, because with every guy, you tend to get it. I always send them a voice note and I say, before I get into this, let your partner hear this voice note I'm saying right now. And I explain about, the body's switching off, that sort of sex drive going in, because it doesn't, not got enough calories to fucking walk to the shops, let alone have sex. Don't quite say it in those words, but they often kind of get that whole, like, sort of, I'm not feeling as worried or stressed about that. Because if you're a guy that's never prepped before and all of a sudden that happens, that can be quite alien to you and quite worrying at times. But I often say to guys, listen, couple, like 2-3 weeks post-shoot, you'll be absolutely fine. But I think one other thing to add that's maybe a bit off topic of what we just said is that, you'll know, and any listeners will know that we'll implement some refeeds or some high days for clients. However, how often, and I did this a few years ago, you give someone a refeed. Now, rather than sticking to what you've given them, they go fucking miles over it. You've put one bagel, they've had 3, you said one Pop-Tart, they've had 4, and kind of like, you sort of like binge on that day and try and in secret not tell their coach. Whereas I always just say, and you preach this as well, just be open and honest, and then that way we can kind of go from there. But I'll get your 2 cents in a sec, is that people maybe have this innate fear of they don't want to disappoint their coach, they don't want to fuck up, they're maybe a bit guilty or feeling a bit ashamed about that, whereas it's an easy solution to work around, isn't it?
Yeah, like, well, because we're experienced now, prior, I probably couldn't tell if someone had been messing up at that stage in prep. But now, if I know someone's messed up, I can tell. But what you've got to remember from a coaching aspect, or if you are a client of ours, we are pretty much just data analysts. Like, that moment you check in, it's not that you're not a person anymore, but I'm analysing your photos, I'm analysing your data. Everything we do is to help you get to your goal. So there will be, in your first prep, there will be times that you struggle. But the clients I personally feel who reach out to you, let you know what's happening straight away, you can help with that. If you don't let that out and then 3 weeks later you tell your coach, it's not that helpful. And as Vaughn says, our job is to be proud of our service and our clients. It's not to, like, I've fucked up on a diet before. I know what it's like. So the experience we've got will help with that. So I think with a lot of clients or a lot of competitors I speak to, they're scared to, as you say, disappoint their coach. But what you've got to remember is your coach is there to help you. And it can be a real hard one because everyone has different struggles when they do prep or when you get to that level of leanness.
Yeah, I think when, this is an example from a couple of weeks ago, she's probably listening, I got a message from a client who, it happened a couple of weeks in a row. They'd said about how they'd overeaten. At the time, they didn't feel like they were being themselves, and it was like they were someone else, and then they started worrying about continuing. When I jumped on the phone, like straight away as a coach, I'm always like, let's jump on the phone and speak about it, because at the time she was thinking about stop prepping. And I always said, right, let's logically break it down on why you're thinking like this. Number one, she'd set unrealistic expectations of how she thought she should look at this point. And I went, is this the best you've ever looked in your life, in your adult life? She went, yeah. I went, cool, shut up. Because you don't know, you shouldn't be going in with any expectations. Number two, she was constantly comparing herself to others on Instagram. To, Girl down south that's been competing for 5 years, girl up north 4 years, etc. First time doing a photo shoot. And then number three, like you mentioned earlier, had no one around her, hadn't told anyone about it, that she was prepping and had support. And I was like, you do realise that you're in a group chat with about 50 women and you can reach out to them at any point? She went, oh yeah. But those three things we found were the logical reason why she had had that, I will fuck it moment, and went over her calories, had some cookies or whatever it is. So I was just adding that in as a simple solution to anyone that's felt like, she told me straight away, but rather than give up on it, think, actually, here's the logical way of why it happened. You got anything to add?
Yeah, well, you've actually just nailed it there. But something I think is, so one, competing is a very short-lived career because most people compete once, they get pissed off they don't win, and they go to the pub and Domino's for the rest of their life. But the reason that is, so not many first-time competitors win. It's like, it doesn't happen that often. I've had a couple, you've had a couple, but it doesn't happen that often. Me and Vaughn are case in points for that. Your first prep, you are getting in the best shape you have ever gotten. From there, you are building your physique. So how I looked 6 years ago is not how I look now. It's a constant progression. And if you can take that away and enjoy your prep, obviously it'll be hard, but you should be just looking at it like you have accomplished something you never thought you would, not looking at it. For example, I can go on Instagram right now and in 30 seconds find 15 guys that are bigger than me and in better shape, because that's life. There's also 15 guys with more money than me and more cars. It's not productive. You have to look at it like you are just bettering yourself. And as Vaughn says, when you go into the logical standpoint of it, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, 100%. I think if we were to talk about guys in general, a lot of the points we've discussed have been to do with guys and girls, but if you talk about like assisted guys, and I think back to me in 2017, take far too much gear, way too much gear than they actually need, just simply because they are, it's like blind leading blind. I'm not saying that anyone out there is, we're not necessarily medically qualified to give advice, but we can talk about things in hypothetical and whatnot. But if I think back to 2017, I was on way too much gear. I take less now than I did back then. But it always seems to be not with all of them, but you'll get the keen beans. They'll be like, oh, what drug are we going to add in next? What drug are we add next? Oh, should we add in that drug because it's going to help me do the X, Y, and Z? And I'm always like, if it's your first prep and you're not that big, it's not about the drugs. Do you agree?
Yeah, well, it's that statement, like the minimal effective dose, like it's the same with training. Like it's not, if you do want to go down that path, and obviously, as Vaughn said, we are not medically trained, but we can advise or we have anecdotal experience. People go from like being some natural guy that competed last year and didn't do that well, mainly because they didn't have enough tissue and they might not have been the best at dieting. And they go, well, I know why I didn't win. It's because I didn't take loads of gear. And then they start taking more than some guy who weighs 20 kilos more than them, and then get to the next show and then go, oh, wait, I still can't diet. They've not looked at the things they're not good at. They've just looked at, I think if I do this, this will make me better. And it's not as simple as that. And I think that, and another thing I would say happens a lot with guys, I don't think it happens so much with females. As you diet, there is going to be movements that are going to take a hit. And the amount of times I see people in prep that are 10 kilos lighter, so there's your case in point, you're 10 kilos lighter, you have no your stability is gone, and you're still trying to press what you did 10 kilos ago, but you're doing this. Like, you have to look at your logbook as we're trying to maintain tissue, but you have to be like very smart with how you look at it.
Yeah. And we've all been guilty of that. I think there comes a time, if you're a seasoned competitor, it's easy enough to maintain those lifts and at times accept a small drop. But as a newbie, because obviously, like we'll preach progressive overload quite a lot, they want to continue to get stronger, and of course they should. But there is going to come a time where if a movement starts to look like something completely different, then you've got to take the load down a little bit and focus more on execution. However, I have noticed that in natural females, they have an ability to maintain their strength really across the board, minus maybe push.
Yeah, or maybe squats, maybe where there's a little bit of load through the lumbar. But
if it's like a barbell squat, yeah. But I think what I find is like if it's machine based, they're fine. The natty guys, it'll just be push. Everything else tends to hold. Then for us assisted guys, usually you can get stronger the whole time. Or
your logbook is a tool, but also so is your mindset. I think so many people go, I'm lighter, so I'm weaker. And then they just start naturally dropping down weight. It's not as simple as that. Like I seen Vaughn hit a PB on a Widowmaker on a hack squat 2 weeks out. Now, not everyone's going to do that, but if there's a will, there's a way. You have to be very, so as like, if movements look like shit, yeah, drop them. But don't just drop a movement because you go in the gym and you go, oh, I'm 2 kilos lighter this month. I need to go lighter. It's not as simple as that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So I guess if we've spoken about a lot of the mistakes that we've perhaps seen competitors make, we should really kind of go on to what they could do to set themselves up for a successful prep in 2021, or maybe perhaps some people that are just getting started in the journey, it's going to be 2022. So, I mean, for me, I'll always say to not overcomplicate the process, because if you don't have a coach, it's easy enough to do so. But I guess my first point of advice for someone is to get a coach. It doesn't necessarily need to be us, but it's got to be someone that you click with, because without that accountability, I mean, it's easy to go off plan. How easy is it for some clients that are getting coached to go off plan? Very, very easy, right? So I think that when a client comes on board and you'll do the same, is when you can say, right, we're going to take you from where you're at right now, we're going to push you up to, we're going to put on 6-7 kilos in 6 months, we're going to come back down, recomp here, push back up. It breaks the process down, opposed to going, oh shit, I've got a year and a half, that's ages away, and before they know it, they're 4 months out. It's a case of, right, like you did with Magda, break it down to push calories up here, pull them down there. So my first piece of advice is to get a coach. What would yours be?
Well, it's exactly that, isn't it? Because I think what you said there is a prime example. Say someone says, right, I'm competing next September, and that's their only thought. Whereas if I looked at that, it would be, right, you're competing next September, here's where we need to be. And now let's break down every stage to get you there. And it has to be that, like you speak about it all the time with me, without a plan, I'm shocking. Like that goes for business, training. Like I'm that annoying guy who's asking Vaughn, what we're doing here. But it's because a plan is what guides you there. And the other one, starting with a coach early, I hate to tell people this, but it's very, very easy to let yourself down for the majority of the population. If it wasn't, the whole population would be where they want to be. And having a coach, having that accountability, and also investing money is going to help you stick to the plan better. So a plan and starting early are massive, massive.
It can also unconfuse the process, because there is so many different training modalities, reps and reserve, this and next thing. If a coach comes around, just like Cal's done with you, and he's going to do with me shortly, and says, right, boom, follow that, you just go into just robot mode. Like, cool, I've got Smith up next. After that, I've got V squat. Cool, right after that, I've got leg press. That's in rep range. And all you need to then focus on is weights on, weights on, weights on. And then it's up to the coach to decide, right, I always say this to clients, like, we'll run the same program for a long time, and we'll always assess the photographs to say, right, is the current volume program split having the desired effect? Let's say, for example, like many bikini girls, they need to bring up their glutes. And maybe they're training like legs maybe almost 3 times a week, maybe 2.5 effectively, right? After a while, is that bringing up? Yeah, it is. Cool, keep going. Keep going, keep going. It might be that I use Laura Brand as an example. When this was pre-COVID, first 8 weeks of our program, massive response from glutes and hamstrings, but quads not quite the same. So what did we do? We added 2 sets of quad across the week. What happened? Quads start to respond. So I just wanted to give that as an example of that. Yeah, basic programming works, but how it needs to be a bit more personal as well.
I think like with competitors or first-time competitors, things they need to do, and the reason for hiring a coach is so simple, because all your emotional attachment to things you do is going to slow you down. And what I mean by this is, now, if you look at my physique, my legs are pretty developed. My arms are not pretty developed. Why is that? I love training legs. I hate training arms. Now, I done my own programming last year and the year before. So guess what I did not put in? Arms. What happened as soon as I start working with Cal? There's loads of arms in. And that's the same with your training. If you're trying to do it yourself, all the decisions you make are going to be led by emotions, which there's not anything wrong with, but your coach looks at it logically. And as Vaughn says, we give you every client will be coached differently because some people will come in and their like level of knowledge on the subjects way up here. It needs to be what works for you. If there's a client who does not understand anything about calories, you're not speaking about micronutrients. And that's what can happen. People get really confused because they're looking at one person's prep and another person's prep, where what they're missing is it's just following the plan.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think in any plan, one thing that gets massively overlooked is posing. And, you know, you and me, it's a bit of a different story. But first-time competitors, they're like, hey, I want to compete this year. Say it's maybe January. I want to compete in April or May. And I go, cool, send me some photos of the mandatory quarter turns. Like, what's that? And you go, what? what do you mean, what's that? And they start to learn posing as they started prep. And I always just say, whoa, hold up. I'm always like you should try and learn to pose the year before you want to compete. Because by the time prep comes around, you're already you're not a pro, but you can get in and out the movements and the positions just fine. As a coach, it's a nightmare when someone's started prepping and they've started learning posing. The check-in photos are totally different. One week the arm's up here, the next week it's down there, the glutes hitched up, it's down. Whereas, I guess when you think of how nervous people will be before their first show, I always say if you learn it a year before, yeah, okay, you're still going to be nervous, but you're going to be so much more confident in your ability to go up and, if it's females, flick your hair, drop your shoulders, guys, do your T-walk or your routine and not fuck up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's something that definitely needs done, like learning posing early. And you can see it as well, but it's the reason I think it's so important from the perspective of, say you've just started or you're in a gaining phase, there's times that you might not feel that good. If I just stand normal, I don't look that great. As soon as I flare my lats and I go in a position, I think, fuck, I look good or I look better. And all those things will help you. Plus, if you know how to spread your lats, when you train your lats, you can contract them more. Or for guys, like how many times you get a check-in photo and someone's trying to tense their quads, but they don't know how to actually do it. So then if you improve that, guess what's going to happen when you go on a leg extension? I think everything has to work in tandem. It's not just how you diet, how you train. It's how you do everything combined.
Yeah, you're right. I still remember when Joe Parrish was trying. He taught me how to spread my lats. And if you're watching on YouTube, the first time I tried to do it, I just went like that. Because you went, bring your shoulders forward. I just went, boom. And it like when you get it, it's amazing how much more, you're right, you connect in the gym than you do just without it. But it took me literally 2 weeks of trying to do it before it was like, because now when clients tell me, oh, I can't spread my lats, I'm always a bit like, what? But then I think back to, oh shit, I couldn't really do it at one point. And I think people often forget when they'll look at you, me, or anyone else that's been doing it a long time, that we were once in their shoes as well and made the same mistakes.
I think what can happen with posing, and I always explain this to people roughly know how to train and they roughly know how to track calories. They might need help with it, but they roughly know how to do it. Posing is an unknown. So it's scary. Like for most people, if you said to them, if you're sitting in a room and you said, go get up there and dance by yourself, most people wouldn't do it. And it's the same with posing. I think a lot of people put it off because they're like, oh, that's scary. I'm not going to be good at it. But so Vaughn said before we started recording, my photo shots just came back and he went, that's the best your abs have looked. I have not trained abs. I just learned how to vacuum. Now, I could not teach myself to do that, so I pay the yoga teacher to teach me. There's nothing wrong with not being good at something. Like, I've got new movements in my rotation that I'm not that great at, but in 6 months I will be. So see it as a challenge, not as being scared like, oh my God.
Yeah, for anyone listening, Ali actually has a secret hobby of yoga. Likes to do it with pink ribbons in his hair.
I wish I did yoga. I might not be so injured.
But on top of posing, one thing that I get every single year or every single new season is, people want to come on board, compete. And I'll say, cool, which federation do you want to do? Then they go, how many are there? What are they? Which ones are there? And I will say, so many different ones that perhaps have so many different different criteria of the same class or different poses. Like you look at PCA and Two Bros, completely different in bikini, right? So my suggestion was going to be to those looking to compete is have a discussion with your coach when you are, say, a year and a half away. What federation do you think would be best suited to? But maybe going along to some shows and just seeing how is that show run? How does it look? What do the girls look like, on stage? How do you like that presentation? Personally, I favour the IFBB style posing. I think that it just looks a bit better, but too often. But it's, for us, we'll always work with, our target audience will be, your first-time competitors. But it's all right not knowing. But do you think that people just don't do enough research, or is there too much? Oh, I'll just do PCA and that's it.
100%. Like I actually have a client who I won't say who they are, but they have competed before, and that was with a different coach. And when I took them on, I was like, perfect, send through everything. And I was like, send your posing routine. Didn't know their posing routine. And I think this happens a lot more than you would think, where people love the idea of competing, but they don't understand that there's a lot more to it than that. Like, how many times do people say they want to compete and you're getting them lean and they go, whoa, bikinis are really expensive. And I'm like,
yeah,
something you could have looked at a while ago. Like, everything, it's exactly what was said about the plan, and you're breaking it down from where you need to be and breaking it down. You need to look at the whole scenario, because some people only want to compete with UKUP because they love their posing style. Some people only want to compete with the PCA, but if you're not built for the PCA, going on stage with them just because you like the posing, is it going to be a good idea? No. So you need to take as much information as you can.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll be honest, like, back in the day, I didn't know what federations there were. I was just like, I think at the time, it was when UKBFF was kind of coming to it's not ended by any means, but its popularity was swiftly decreasing. A year and a half before, I was like, I'm doing UKBFF, just because I knew one guy that done UKBFF.
Yeah.
And Joe was like, oh, you should try this trial. No, I'm just doing the one, and that's it. So I guess that what I should have done at the time was 2 or 3 shows. But my other piece of advice on top of everything is to do 2 or 3, and if you can afford it, and that's, I guess, a plug here is go listen to the podcast where I talk about the price of competing, which is episode 21, 22. I need to check that. But I would say, and I say this to many beginners, I say, right, do your research, pick your main federation. Let's say it's Two Bros or whatever. Month before it, let's do a warm-up show. If it's your very first time, let's maybe do a regional, but let's do a regional that's not going to be too busy. So kind of quiet. One that we can just, our main goal is to get stage presence, stage time. Then you pick a second one that's got a little bit bigger, a little bit more of importance to you. By that point, the second time, you're so much more confident. You're at the side of the stage being like, right, let's do it. You're going to improve on what you've done before, because maybe you didn't fall over, but maybe you didn't put your hand in a certain place that first time. And the third time, you're just at the side of the stage being like, right, fuck, call my number, let me come out, let's fucking get it. But I guess that confidence is probably learned over time, whereas I just feel it's now at times could be a bit of, not a waste, but just doing the one show when you get that lean seems to me like it is a little bit of a waste if you're not doing another show or at least a photo shoot. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%, because the thing is with competing as well, it can be, and this isn't to put anyone off, but you've got to remember, you get up there, there's 3 judges. Sometimes that can be preference. So you could go on stage and look, literally everyone in the crowd's going, they've won. And the judges just think, that's not what we're looking for. They've had a team meeting beforehand and they want something that looks different. That does not mean you're not in sick shape. It just means that that's happened. And competing more than once as well will, perhaps for the next time you compete, you know what federation you like, you know what you're suited to more, and you enjoy it more. The first time you're very nervous. It's hard to enjoy something when you're like unsure of what to think about. I've got a plug as well, actually, because I've done a first-time females competitor vlog. I done it right at the start of lockdown. It's way back on the vlogs. But I went through all the things that you need to take into consideration to compete for females. So that'll be helpful for you.
100%, man. I don't know how many pieces of content there is across all the platforms that we have about advice for competing or whatnot, but now just seemed like a perfect time to do it, with the fact that shows are going ahead now when they weren't for so long. And next year we would hope that all the shows will go ahead, not necessarily normal like they normally would, but at least we'll get a chance to compete. I think what you said about the judges having a desired look is so important. And I had this discussion with one of the new girls that just came on board. She's competed this past weekend, and she couldn't understand why some of the girls that placed below her, she won British Masters title, looked a bit harder and had more visible abs. And I went, well, the fact is they were not in the criteria that the judges wanted. I went, you don't need to have six-pack abs and be hard to be a bikini competitor. And I said, it just meant that you fit. And then she was like, but Vaughn, when I did the open class, and it was a different scenario, she thought she would be in about the mix, and she wasn't. And I said, well, right, how did the girls in open class look? And she went, they were all a bit taller than me and a bit skinnier than me. And I went, so you were the odd one out. And she went, what? And I went, it's a law of averages. I gave her my scenario back in 2017. I was the biggest guy out of 4. They placed me last, and they favoured the skinnier guys. So
last year,
yeah, the girls that won her open class were a little bit skinnier than her, not as much tissue. So what you said, huge importance, because people can be in the best shape of their life, they don't place, and they feel like the world is over. Their self-worth is 0. They think they look fucking shit, when in fact it's the best they've ever looked in their life. And it can be like quite demoralizing for people if all they want is a medal, opposed to thinking, as you said right at the start, it's not about placing in your first show. I came dead last, effectively, my first show.
The big thing with that is that, and me and myself and my client Matt spoke about this on a live the other week, but you should be always proud of your accomplishments. And this is probably the best advice I could give for a first-time competitor, because I see it all the time. They just go through it in a blur, and then they compete, and then they disappear, and then they don't reverse diet well, and they don't ever give themselves a pat on the back. As like we're the same, where you have to be really happy with what you've achieved, but also want to achieve more. There's nothing wrong with that. But see the amount of times that people don't absorb it, and they don't even give themselves credit for the hard work they've put in. That's something you need to do, because you can't be judging your self-worth on a trophy or an Instagram like. It's got to be how you feel. You should be accomplished.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I guess. The more people compete, the higher chances of them winning. You mentioned Kuba earlier on the podcast. On the podcast I done with him, 20 episodes ago or whatever. I think he said that, placing is a form of progression the more you compete. Like, you're more than likely, the more you compete over the years, if you improve, you actually have proper structured off seasons, you're more than likely going to place eventually. But it's not putting everything down to the be all end all and turning up and realizing that, if you're a guy and you're doing bodybuilding, that 3 guys turn up that are way more jacked than you, that have been doing it for 5 more years than you. It's just the way it is. You might turn up to a different show, barely any guys show up, or you do a little bit better. But I think that would probably be a good spot to end there. However, I'm sure there's a lot of people wondering, they'll say, Ali, when is your OnlyFans account getting started? When's that coming out? So give the listeners an idea of when that's coming out, where they can get in touch with you if they don't already know you.
If you were stupid enough to pay me money for OnlyFans, you need to get yourself sorted out. Where you can find me is on the VW Physique website. You can see all of our stuff there. On my Instagram, which is aliburge_VW Physique, or the YouTube channel, which again is just the VW Physique one. All our stuff gets combined across. So On my Instagram, anyone who's got any questions, please just drop me a DM. I will get back to everyone. For anyone as well listening that does know I am type 1 diabetic, I've been getting quite a lot of questions about that, so please feel free to fire away, and we are always there. Also, as a brand, Vaughn will be telling you, but we've got a lot of stuff coming up, so please stay tuned to all of our Instagrams to see some really cool things that we've got in the pipeline.
Yeah, superb. I just assumed at the start of the podcast people would know that, you know, you're a part of VW Physique and you're under the brand. But yeah, maybe I should maybe you should have said that at the start for any new listeners. But I'm sure by now they've went on the website, they've checked you out. You're going to see a bit different personalities with me and Ali's vlogs. Completely different, probably. Ali's a bit more laid back and blasé, whereas I'm a bit more at times monotonous with that sort of things. But no, man, listen, cracking input. I think that a lot of listeners will get huge knowledge bombs. Maybe not huge knowledge bombs, but they're certainly going to get a lot of things that they maybe haven't thought about from, admittedly, our mistakes, but also observations over the years. So if you're listening, if you are in Scotland, I hope that you've enjoyed the past couple of weeks the gym's been open. If you're in England or elsewhere across the world, in the UK, continue to do the do. But for me and Ali, give it the beans.